Talofa lava. I'm Phoebe, and this is the Good People Podcast.
It's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Good People Podcast. My name is Andy from In Other Good News, and in this show I get to talk to some of the best humans getting around. As the name suggests, these are all good people, but it's very rare that I get to speak to royalty. And today in the studio, I've got the Queen of Cacao. Her name is Phoebe. She's the co-founder of Livin, Koko, and she joins us on the show. Phoebe, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Andy. Queen of Cacao.
The Queen of Cacao. Well, I think it's true because I've heard you say before, you know everything there is to know about cacao.
Well, I try to know as much as I can about cacao, yeah. I'm always very aware that there could be someone else in the room that knows a little bit more.
Well, there's certainly no one else in this room that knows more.
Yeah, I'm winning here.
Yeah, you're going to win this one. So you've created a business called Livin Koko. Now, Koko meaning cacao in Samoan, and that is where the business is based around. Can you tell us, because there's going to be some people here who don't know who you are, although if you've ever had some of the Livin Koko products, delicious, I have to say. So, but it's not all about the products. Livin Koko, can you tell us about what impact your business is having? Because on the surface level, it's products, but there's so much more about Livin Koko.
Livin Koko is now the largest importer of cacao from Samoa. We get 95% of our ingredients from the Pacific Islanders, working with small domestic plot village farmers. With the cacao that we bring in, we work through some beautiful relationships based in Samoa. We are able to engage with over 400 domestic plot farmers, and these are some of the most vulnerable people in the islands. We are a zero waste manufacturing space in Ravenhall that is solar powered. We use all components of the bean, and we try and make sure that our footprint is gentle on the land. We use indigenous cultivation for cultivating our cacao and farming our cacao in Samoa, but we also bring our indigenous knowledge and indigenous Samoan ways of being into our business. We run events and activations in Australia that support the youth and work with the Pacific people, growing and supporting our culture and bringing it out there for the world to see.
It's beautiful. And you grew up with cacao. Like, basically, you've known it as a thing for your whole childhood. It's something you've grown up around. In fact, I heard you once refer to cacao as like your lollies growing up.
There's a part of the cacao fruit that many Samoans would see as like the lole or the lollies. So it's the sweet part of the fruit. It's not actually the beans of the fruit. It's the middle part that the beans are connected to. And when you suck on that, it's very sweet. And it is like a lolly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was your lollies growing up. And also your other connection too, because I read somewhere along the way that your grandfather created the strand of cacao. Yeah.
Yeah. So my grandfather was the high chief of our village, but also of our district. Our village was Whaiusu on the island of Upolu in Samoa, and he was also the general manager of WesTech. WesTech was an organization that was doing a lot of the post-harvesting processes of cacao, so the fermentation and the drying in huge quantities and then exporting to Europe. He activated many villages and matai is our word for chiefs, villages and spaces to start growing cacao and ensure that our people got a good price for it.
So he was pretty instrumental in developing cacao as an export product? And
Yeah, there was a time where in the Pacific, and especially in Samoa, through a lot of the trade that was coming through, various diseases and stuff were coming through and affecting not only people but also native plants and also the cacao. So to create a stronger strand of cacao, he did a series of cuttings, bringing together different strands to try and eliminate the black dot disease that was coming through. He named the strand Luffy 7. Luffy was the area that he did his experiments, and 7 was the number of attempts that he did.
the seventh attempt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 was the winner.
Yeah, like RP7 or WD-40. It's
Yeah.
yeah, all winners. Blend 43. I'm not so sure.
Glen Sweeney.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to smell Glen's 1 through 19. I don't. I mean, if Glen 20 was the winner, I'm not sure.
True.
So that's beautiful. So you're not only supporting the growth. Actually, you sent seeds back to Samoa. Is that right? To help people plant seeds so that they would have flourishing crops in the years to come. I remember one time you were telling me that.
Not quite. So there are programs that have happened in Samoa,
Yep.
championed by Savai Koko, which is one of a large farm and plantation in Samoa, the Samoan Chamber of Commerce, and also very much like supported by other cacao creatives. And that was to grow seedlings and give seedlings out for free to anyone who wanted to cultivate cacao.
Yep.
So that was all based in Samoa.
Yeah. And so these people now are harvesting cacao and yeah.
It takes 3.5 years for a tree to fruit. So it's not like tomatoes, within 6 months.
Yeah.
To have at least one, usually just one.
Yeah.
So 3.5 years for the seed to fruit, and then 7 days of fermentation, 1 to 2 weeks of sun drying, and then, exporting. So, if you were to plant a seed, it'll probably take nearly 4 years for you to make chocolate.
Yeah.
From planting a seed.
Yeah. And for all of those people who haven't quite caught on yet, cacao is important for chocolate.
Yeah.
So this is a very, very important business that you've created. So well done on the business, because the business has grown substantially, and especially through the COVID period, which we'll come back to. But what I'm interested to hear is what provoked you into creating this business in the first place. Like, if we were to rewind back to, this is pre-COVID times. How old is Livin Koko now?
About 7-8 years.
7 or 8 years, yeah. So if we rewind, we've talked offline about some certain situations that helped you. I guess you wanted to do something to find all the joy in the world, is the way you sort of described it to me, and to bring some joy in bad times. So you've experienced some. There's a couple of situations that have, I guess, been kind of the story almost behind what's sent you towards cacao and supporting international markets, right? You mentioned to me that it was around the time that a friend of yours, your friend Gilmar, who tragically passed, that was a bit of an awful situation. And for you, you were looking to, I guess, back to, you were talking about getting back to being with your people to help grieve in ways that were suited to your cultures from back home. And that was something that Western culture wasn't really providing. Is that the right? Am I getting this right for you? Like, I'm thinking about how you explained going from those feelings of grief and ending up. There's another good story coming as well. Ending up creating a business that supports so many people.
So Living Koko was founded by myself, Glenn Reese, and another business partner called Steve Ward. Steve Ward is no longer with Living Koko. He's moved on to other things. But there are several stories that, I guess, like any situation, that run parallel to the activation of Living Koko. If you look inside yourself, you always, with anything that's happening, anything great that's happening within your world, you can trace back far enough to a moment of like, oh, okay, this was actually the moment that triggered a series of events to bring you to where you are. And a lot of those times when it's a good moment, you can trace back to that moment of grief and that journey of getting through that grief. Losing Jill, I'm not gonna swear. Losing Jill was massive.
Yeah.
It was massive for not just friends, family, but I think the whole community of Melbourne, but also Australia, worldwide, and overseas.
Yeah.
It was a very public moment, and there were lots of things to deal with during that time. There was the lack of feeling safe, I think, for a lot of people within Melbourne, especially a lot of women. It really made us question about, how we moved through the world, how we moved through life and after hours and things like that, and how we were treated in different spaces. For myself, and I can only really talk about how this affected myself, it brought up a lot of things that had happened to me in the past. Sexual violence, domestic violence within partners and things like that, and how you, and as that was triggered within me, layered upon grief, layered upon just trying to get through the world, layered upon being a migrant in a different country, not having family connections, not having a understanding on grieving rituals within a Western context of Australia, and just really craving for the community grief space instead of the let's just get on back with work kind of mentality that I think can happen when in many cultures, can happen also here in Australia in some spaces.
And the fast news cycle as well.
Yeah, the fast news cycle. Yeah, you're right. It put me in darkness, I'll be honest. Put me in complete darkness, put me in a space of just hard out anxiety. I couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
I'd try to leave the house and there was just this brick wall.
Yeah.
And as someone who was running my own music festival with my partner at the time, like we were very social people. I was a performing artist. Like it just crumbled my whole world.
Yeah.
So I moved to the Western Suburbs.
Yeah.
Moved to the Western Suburbs.
Yep.
Found the Pacific community. Found some really beautiful friends that helped me through my grief. And then also with a good friend, Noelani Lenaves, became part of a professional dance group. I'm a Polynesian dancer, so became part of a professional dance group called Nuhalani, which helped open up so many doors and explore different ways of creating light. During this time and during this grief, I was getting to know Glenn Reese. So Glenn Reese is my partner in life, partner in business. And I was hearing, he was going on his own journey, which we'll get to soon. That's a story. And what happened with Glenn, right?
Yeah.
Is so Glenn went trekking in Papua New Guinea, and with some friends, all ex-military, retired military folk. And
On like one of those organised sort of trips, was it? Like a...
I think they were all, there was a trekking company that was involved.
Yep.
And on the first night, or the first day of the trek, their group was ambushed and attacked by some people that had broken out of the local prison. And 2 people were killed on site. One died later in hospital, and Glenn and the trekking group, including the porters, were really badly injured. This is all online on Australian Story. There was a huge write-up about it. The Australians were flown home, and the PNG porters and people were taken to hospital. The hospitals in PNG, you know, they're very different to the ones here. They don't have some of the facilities and equipment and things like that, and time. So Glenn and the trekkers got together and they raised a huge amount of funds to bring Andrew over, to support Andrew in getting him back to walking, because he was unable to walk.
Andrew was one of the porters?
Yeah, Andrew was one of the porters.
Yeah. So they raised a bunch of money for him to get back on his feet, effectively, for want of a better term.
Yeah, and then during that time, there was lots of conversations about, you know, what else could he do, and they explored the option of Cacao. So there was, as I said, you know, parallel stories coming together in the end, but there was a story about Cacao through PNG, and then my story of, I guess, managing grief, depression, anxiety, and coming through to wanting to create activation that was of service to people, but also creating joy within the world.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story, but so loaded with, you know, tragedy as well. But you being someone who knew about Cacao, being able to assist immediately, I guess, with the Papua New Guinean cacao project, because you already had a history. So you were able to sort of jump right in, yeah?
Yeah. We all went as a group to Samoa, connected with WIBD, Women in Business, who had a group of cacao farmers that could support, that we could bring over their cacao and start experimenting with here in Australia. But also they offered us like guidebooks on the fermentation process, how to build the fermentation boxes, how to build the drying tables and things like that, which, you know, it is a lot of knowledge that I've been blessed to have through osmosis, with just being within my family and with my family's history, but to have, you know, actual measurements and things like that, where it was a real bonus.
Yeah, that's good. So then that was effectively the birth of Livin Koko, yeah?
Yeah.
And the name Livin Koko, that has some meaning as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, so Koko means cacao. Koko also means blood, or toto means blood. And Livin Koko means continuing the story or the journey of your bloodlines.
And it's delicious.
Segue.
Yeah. But so, I mean, there's some other things, like, because you're a very, like, active community person. You're a Polynesian dancer. Obviously, Livin Koko has a logistical chain all the way back to Samoa. In fact, you've referred to at times as being able to, you've got someone along the way of pretty much all of your logistics from Samoa all the way to Australia, right? Like, how does that work? How do you, because there's no sort of direct way of getting it here, is there?
No, it actually has to go through New Zealand too. But I guess I'll talk from the top down. We have a group of elders that support our business that can, and our elders is my mum and my aunties, and the Stanley family, and then we have some of our some of our farmers' parents who come together each week in New Zealand for church group and prayer time, and so they are always talking and sharing story about what's going on within Livin Koko and what's going on in Samoa, and then they come back and my mum comes back and tells us, and this helps us reflect on our practices as a business and our communication and how to make sure that whatever we come through with is respectful in the space. And then, you know, we have actively engaged a Samoan shipping company, owned Samoan shipping company here in Australia, because we also know that, you know, we have our own contacts, but then they have a whole group of contacts as well in Samoa that can support the guidance of the beans to Australia.
And the beans have their hands held all the way from the Samoan farms all the way to your factory.
Yeah, lovingly.
And you're a zero waste business. So you use, you've got to do a lot of stuff to use all the waste, right? Because there's an outside husk and stuff that comes off. And how do you use all of that?
Yeah, to start with, you need to make sure that the husk that you have, the cacao husk, is processed well, and the beans are processed well, and even like the drying is done correctly. There are beans that have a lot of white marks on it, which is mold. That's not the beans we have, and the mold isn't affecting the actual taste of the bean inside, but it affects what you can do with the husk. So we had to make sure that there was, a lot of quality control around that. We used the cacao husk for a cacao husk tea, which allowed us to work with other farmers to bring in different ingredients like ginger, coconut, vanilla, and, increase our reach for Pacific farms. And then we sift the husk and we create body scrubs, chocolate body scrubs for local beauticians and spas, and then we also make face products and things like that. So if there's any chocolate that isn't edible, like, whether we've screwed up something along the way, the roasting or something like that, then we'll put it into body scrubs, or we'll put it into a face mask. And it allows us to then also work with other farmers to bring in medicinal oils from the Pacific Islands that you can't readily get here.
Yeah, and you mix it all together. And you've even made recently a non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
Out of part of the waste products.
Yeah, we're really blessed to meet Chilla and Kate, and they own Brewery Cola, which is based in Ocean Grove. Chilla's Fijian, and he has a very Pacific vibe in his alcoholic beer that he serves. And he worked with us to blend a couple of different kinds of roasted profiles of husk together to then create Benina is the name of the beer.
Yeah. So what does it taste like if it's got? Can you describe it? We were actually going to have one.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to bring it.
She forgot the beer. We're supposed to have a beer. This was going to be a first for the Good People podcast. We're going to drink beer during the non-alcoholic beer.
I'll bring it.
But yes, is it possible to describe the taste? Because I can't imagine what that would taste like compared to beer that I would know.
It's an amber ale.
Yeah.
Some people have referred to it tasting similar to a stout. It has a depth and flavor. I think that is because of the cacao that's been added. The aftertaste isn't as bitter as beer can have, like yeasty, that kind of stuff. It you definitely taste the cacao coming through in the aftertaste.
Sure.
And you can smell it too in the can.
And that's just from using the husk product.
Yeah, that's just using the husk. We're Chiller chose a group of different hops that brought out more like tropical Pacific flavors, like the papaya and things like that, and he combined that really well with with our cacao.
Yep. I'll just have to imagine that.
So
Phoebe, imagine what that beer tastes like, or maybe I'll have one. Although I am seeing that it's popping up everywhere now. I saw just down the road at Migrant Coffee. I saw, so I'm sure I'll come across it at some point. I'll come across it at some point. Something else we've talked about, and this is reflecting a little bit on periods of time that lead you towards what you're doing now. And in many ways, we have similar sort of values based on the situations that we came from. So not great situations where you've decided, look, it's really worth bringing more joy to the world because there's a lacking of that. And some of the experiences along the way have really highlighted the need for more joy along the way. Like, do you feel like as the business has progressed, do you feel like you're still able to embody that feeling from where you started as well?
Oh yeah, even more so. I I think when you're going through some really dark times, you can get to a point where you really have to try and push yourself to snap out of it. And the best way for myself is to, acts of service.
Yeah.
Acts of service until, creating those moments of fire of joy. Afi is our word for fire. So afiing people, supporting people, being their cheerleader, but also activating spaces of joy. And even though you're so sad inside, it gets to a point where you're starting to feel that joy within yourself.
Yep.
You can see what you're doing is beautiful. You still have so much like sadness inside you, but then slowly it just starts to rub off on you that that you're part of this moment, and then you start to embody that joy, and you realize how important it is.
Yep.
As you're saying, like, it's so easy to find bad news.
Yeah.
It's so easy to gossip. It's so easy to talk crap about people. You know? And you see it and you hear it all the time, and and you see it all over our televisions and stuff. There's so much trash. But actually, a really wonderful friend of mine, Audrey, said the other day, it's easy to find the dirt. It's really difficult to find the gold. But it's through moments like this and conversations with each other that we get to the gold, that we're not looking for the surface dirt to then go and fling and tell other people about. Like, that does nothing for you. Maybe a moment of dopamine that you're rubbishing someone else and you feel better, but it's this gold that we have through talanoa. Talanoa in Samoan, it's conversation, but it means sharing stories for the greater good. And that's what your podcast is. That's what, we need to do more of.
Yeah, definitely. I am always amazed at how big the negative stories can get and how disposable they are. So they will dominate your head space or your phone or your app, whatever the news feed you have, and they will dominate it for a period of time, and then they just disappear and they're gone. But they were so intense and they get so much coverage. And even through our time, so 3 years ago when we started In Other Good News at the start of the pandemic, the ability to cut through with good news, it is very hard to cut through. Even though most people enjoy it once they see it, it's very difficult to cut through with those good news stories. So I think it's harder work to push the values and the good news through and to be supportive, because it's a constant thing as opposed to a flash in the pan, disposable bad news story that gets you some coverage, So you talk about circular relationships. Do you want to expand on your thoughts around circular relationships and not just having transactional spaces?
The more we honor the farmer, the man or the woman that is willing these plants to come out of the ground, the more we are honored as people. The more we support them and we give them the right amount of money for the work that they are doing. And it's really hard work. You can't get machines to harvest your cacao. Everything has to be done by hand. The more they will be looking after the earth, the more they won't be using pesticides and things like that. And in turn, we get honored, because what we get is a cacao, a product, a chocolate that besides has like amazing juju and energy, it also, it's cleaner for us. It's better for our systems. It's better for our whole bodies. And then the ripple effect of that is we're feeling better. We're better people within our families. We're better people within our communities. So there's whole circular relationship of making sure that we honor the earth, we support the right people that are dealing closely with the earth, ends up honoring us.
And it all comes back. It all comes back. You've done some work, and I want to get this role right. Community cultural development practitioner. All long words.
Sounds
what does that mean? What's that role?
I'll
let you do the talking for that one.
Yeah.
While I stumble over the name.
community cultural development practitioner. That means that you respond to needs within the community, and you know those needs through a deep understanding of what is going on with your community. So you're not going into spaces thinking you're the bee's knees, you've got all the ideas. I can save you. I can fix you, I can save you. You know, you're not with that mentality. You're a sit down, okay, let's just have some deep listening and deep reflecting in the space and be guided by the community of what their needs are and how we could be assistance in that space. With Living Koko, every time we go back to Samoa, we don't have like half-hour, 1 hour meetings. Like, we got to catch up with the farmer. We're there for 4 to 5 hours, you know, minimum.
Yeah.
Like, not max, like minimum. Like, we're having several meals throughout the day. Lots of cacao, like we're drinking lots of koko.
Yeah.
But it allows for time and space to share lots of things, you know, to ask with questions of integrity and questions that can gently move us into a space of really admitting what the true needs are in that area. You know, you can't just fly in a 1 hour coffee meeting, get someone who doesn't know you from a bar of soap, or, you know, who you've just met, to then tell you what is like a deep need within the community, what is one of the true challenges, you know, or why the price is slightly different. It's because of the cyclone that came through. It's because we lost the house. It's because of this. It's because of that. You know, you don't get those that kind of information and knowledge unless you have spent the time for talanoa and deep conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice because in a world where we're becoming more and more detached from our food sources and from sort of, you know what, all the hard stuff, we basically try and detach ourselves somehow, put a barrier between us and the thing, whether it be the product or even death. Like, that's another topic, but we have these barriers between us and all these things that are kind of hard. So food, you walk to the shop, you walk into a supermarket, you pick it off the shelf, you've got no idea. So when it's profit driven, it's about speed and economy, efficiency, but you don't get to see the people that make it, or the effort that they go to get something that's very hand created. So I think it's a beautiful way to be. I imagine it probably doesn't help. You know, profit margins would be lower doing it this way, but at least this way it's a, I don't know, holistic approach.
We have a shared valued approach. So to ensure that everyone that touches the koko or supports the journey of the koko coming to Australia is paid what they believe their value is in the space, you know. But we also acknowledge that, you know, money isn't the only currency. You know, when we look at Living Koko, I see Living Koko as this waka, like this canoe. And we're all in this waka together in this canoe. And when we look over the edge, you know, money can't be the only current that's holding up this waka. Like, there has to be integrity, there has to be kindness, there has to be reciprocity, there has to be all these different currents coming through in this massive Pacific Ocean that supports this journey.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's hard, eh? Like, it's hard because we're born into a system. We're born not by choice. We're born into a system of capitalism. And the system of capitalism puts us into a survival mode where, you know, we are thinking about the bottom line. We are thinking about profits. And I understand when I go out to retailers and that's where they're at. Like, we've also just come through a pandemic. To then start talking about, you know, all these other things that we've considered within our business, you know, people are like, I don't want to hear that right now. I want to pay my rent. Like, I understand that. I understand that we're in just such a crazy system that we didn't choose. But I truly feel like this disconnection we have with ingredients creates a disconnection within us to the land, to the whenua. And the more disconnection we have to the land, to the whenua, the less respect we have it. The more greenhouse emissions, the more waste we're creating, because we don't have the connection of what's actually happening to that land. I remember someone telling me the other day, the world would be a much better place if we all were barefoot. And I was like, you know what? I reckon it would be. We wouldn't be like trashing the ground. There wouldn't be broken glass everywhere. We wouldn't be just walking past broken glass. We'd be cleaning it up. Like, we'd all have much more consideration if we just like got rid of one thing like that. I know lots of people would disagree with their thousands of shoes, with their massive shoe collection.
Yeah.
But, it's worth a thought.
So think about that next time you're going through your shoe collection. That's actually quite similar to the like a connection to country that I've heard with the Australian Indigenous cultures, like actually being feel the land, be a part of the land, go out and actually physically touch the land, as opposed to being, locked in a building or.
I think we're raised to be disconnected from the ecosystem, to forget that we are actually part of the ecosystem. We're built to be part of an ecosystem, and to have this individualistic way of seeing ourselves, where the more you get into community, the more you become of service to community. You see, like, the energy you can create, the positive energy you can create within a community has a huge ripple effect in so many different spaces. The connection to land is so important. And as our ancestors, and even myself as a visitor to this land, and to be so blessed to have a business and be able to work and activate on Wurundjeri country, and even your own ancestors to be visitors to this land, we're the largest, we're the community of diaspora here. We're the ones that are disconnected to, like, the homelands of our ancestors, and the actual foods that connect with our DNA and activate our DNA in beautiful ways. But it's so hard to get those connections when we go to Woolies and we get that packet of spinach and we think we're doing great for our body. Like, it's just this weird matrix, eh?
Yeah, I agree.
You can't get out of.
So you are, the business has grown a lot through the COVID period. You're now importing tons and tons and tons of cacao, and it's going to all these different places. You're creating almost zero waste. What is there left for Livin Koko to do? What's next on the cards?
To take Livin Koko back home, I think. To create a space similar to Livin Koko in Samoa, to add value and to create bars on the land and chocolate on the land that we can have, like, really niche. This chocolate belongs to this village, this chocolate belongs to this village, and like really narrow it down into that kind of space. And then to be able to, have that sold in different hotels and tourism spaces and things like that. But, there's so much joy when you can, there's joy for us as Pacific people to see the word Samoa on a really beautifully packaged item.
Yep.
Or product, and so it was intentionally done that we were bringing in things from the Pacific, and so we could combine, Samoa and Tahiti, Samoa and Tonga, Samoa and Niue, like things like that, or places like this. So to be able to have something that is created on country that also creates employment. I think one of the most difficult things in Samoa during the pandemic was, all tourism stopped, so a lot of jobs were lost. A lot of jobs were lost.
Of course.
Everyone went back to the land, which increased the amount of cacao that came through to us because everyone was cultivating their land again. But, how do we create manufacturing and an industry of manufacturing back home in Samoa, and jobs that don't just stop because of tourism, jobs that, can continue.
Yeah, for longevity and I guess just helping out them more permanently than just flash in the pan tourists coming and going and whatnot. Yeah.
We also we're starting like agricultural tourism in Samoa. Our first one is this September. We're inviting people to come with us on a journey of cacao, to come and visit one of the farms. We're collecting the fruit and vegetables from the farms. We're going to cook it in a umu, which is an earth oven, hot rock oven.
Yeah.
And then to come and visit these spaces and to be part of these relationships that we have back home. I think cacao has become a really big thing in Western spaces, and we understand, the amount of magnesium, iron, and it's just so good for recovery as for athletes in that, how do we connect better with the ingredient?
Yeah. Well, I mean, wars have been fought over cacao, haven't they, in the past, in even in Latin America, not Latin America at the time, but
No, not that.
early Americas fighting over chocolate.
Well, cacao was money. It was seen as a currency.
Yeah.
So I don't know the details of that, but I believe that there would have been some bloodshed.
Yeah, there's definitely, I've seen it written somewhere. Now the only fights over cacao at the moment is the stuff I'm getting out of the cupboard. With everyone wants the hot chockey. Phoebe from Livin, Koko, thank you so much for coming on to the Good People podcast. I think you've got a great story, and it's one of those ones that unless you dig up, it's not one that you're going to come across. Again, like I say, the long trudge that you get from doing good things is a constant effort, as opposed to, like I say, a flash in the pan type situation. You're building strong foundational ecosystems, and I think it's a beautiful story. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
I was surprised and quite flattered that you asked.
Yeah.
I was like, what, me?
Oh, no,
Why not?
Very much. And so also, if people want to find you, they can find you at livincoco.com.
Yeah.
But also your festivals, you're still doing much in the way of the festivals?
We will in the future. Livin Koko has, and before COVID was doing a lot of Indigenous arts festivals in Northern Territory, but also Pacifica art festivals here. We've started our own non-alcoholic bar called Koko Kalapu, the Integrity Bar, where all our drinks are non-alcoholic and has a bit of cacao, mocktails, things like that, and good for your system. So that's an activation that we will be bringing to festivals and to events.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, if you're listening to this, livincoco.com, I'll put the links up also into the notes as well so people can find you. Phoebe, the cacao queen of cacao, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. This is the Good People podcast. And make sure you like and subscribe these episodes. That helps us tell these wonderful stories.
Thank you.
Well, it's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here. They're the good people from round here. Come on, let me introduce you to a few.